Hey, 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 ladies and gents. It's part number 3 of Day 9 Daily number 382, where we learn to be a better gamer. We've been talking a lot about this idea of expanding out our little build order 3 things at a time, where we start in a broad sense and we zoom into little parts and we work on those 3 little tidbits at a time. So let's come back and just try to recreate our list very rapid fire. All right, I have the old list down here just so we can refer to that. But it's important that you not that you know that this happens quite quickly, because I'm taking a lot of time to explain things. But let's envision us doing it really quickly, right? So let's begin looking at the Liquid Hero build. What we did: early expand plus Stargate, expand or third quickly plus fast Templar, end game with lots of expanding and harassing. All right, cool. So then we began by trying some blue things as the next 3 things that we wanted to work on. What were they? The Zealot harass at the start, and then the Stargate harass, or the Phoenix plus Warp Prism. Warp in, Phoenix plus Pylon, Zealot Warp in harass. And then we just asked ourselves a seemingly distant question about Nexus before Forge. And then we just ended up playing this out a little bit. And at this point, you'll notice that we're just sort of like picking and choosing and stuff like that, like how we want to end up doing it. And very quickly, we asked this question about building the Stargate at 6 minutes and 15 food. And we focused hard on that and got this huge list that was fleshed out. This is a lot to type, so I'm just going to start spamming stuff out. But very quickly, we ended up starting to get the sort of complete comprehensive list. And as you're starting to do this, let's say you've been working for a little while, you've been focusing on this, and you say, you know what, I don't know. I'm not really working on that anymore. I don't want to do this. After core gets started, do nonstop Zealot production. Seems okay. Seems absolutely fine. 1 cannon seems absolutely fine. It's time to ask some more questions. It's time to ask... I hate the way that this highlighting works. It keeps moving my stuff around. 1 cannon. Yeah, you know what? That seems fine. So I'm going to remove it. I'm also going to rearrange it so that way it's actually in order. After core gets started, do non-stop Zealot production. 1 cannon. Send 2 Zealots to poke at third. Doesn't matter if my Zealots die. Cool. Build Stargate. Doing stuff. Kill Overlords with Void Ray. And you know, I like my color coding methodology, so I'm actually going to make this blue. Keep making Phoenix, you know, and this is something that I actually really like doing. I like color coding. Yeah, keep making Phoenix. Because that way I can actually glance around here and I can just see, oh yeah, look at all this stuff. I have some answered questions, are in green. I have some building things, maybe second Void Ray. Maybe attack the third aggressively. Cool. So someone asked something that I thought was a great question, and I'm pretty sure I had it highlighted here, but I accidentally erased it, so forgive me. Forgive me, I'm trying to scroll up, see if I can find it in chat, but alas, I can't. The question was, how do we end up controlling our army in the mid-game? How do we end up controlling against that big Zealot, or that big Infestor Broodlord Zergling force that he seemed to have built up so well? So what I want to come back and do is... right after here, we ask the question, what happens when he has a huge Infestor Broodlord army? Now, what I want to note is that we still didn't answer all of everything that we had, but we're just going to work on things 3 at a time. What happens if he has a huge Infestor Broodlord army? Well, cool. I'm going to come back here to Liquid Heroes game, and let's try to be swift about possibly giving an answer. Well, it looks like, yep, our opponent has our this huge Infestor Broodlord army. Phoenixes still poking around. We actually lost some Phoenixes early on, and it's kind of surprising me that Liquid Hero made those Phoenixes. So you know what? I'll happily say, make extra Phoenixes to poke around the map. Try not to cluster. All right, so that's something I'll try out. Is it right? Is it wrong? I don't know. It's one of the things I'm going to end up trying out. I'm moving out with some pretty small forces. Am I really harassing him that much? It doesn't look like it. How do we end up dealing with those engagements? Looks like we're bringing a lot of Templar with energy. And some units. So, I'm going to give this a shot. Try not to cluster. Here's something. Here's my question in red that I have no idea whether it is right or wrong. What happens when he has a huge Infestor Broodlord army? I'm going to make the claim, build, or move out with a high Templar, low unit army to grab towers. This is not a lot of units, but this is a lot of Templar. What does a lot mean? It means whatever the hell you want. 5 with that much energy feels like a lot to me. And because these are my notes, that's fine. As long as I know what the hell I'm talking about and what the hell I'm trying to do, I'm comfortable writing down that many. Move out with high Templar, low unit to grab towers. I actually kind of feel like the move out with the high Templar is the important part of this. I need many high Templar. Not that many other units. Good upgrades. Alright, cool. And I want to just sort of see how he behaves with this. Let's see here. I'm poking around. He does a lot of retreating. Yeah, he doesn't really seem to engage directly. And you know what? I noticed that the Warp Prism is moving out as well to avoid army. Main army is avoiding Broodlords. Notice how I've gone slightly past 3. Alright, I'm zooming up. I think that's important to note. Ooh, expand a lot. Huh. Expand a lot while we're running away. Now here is where it's important to think in terms of 3s. I wrote down 5 things about how to deal with a huge Infestor Broodlord army. Maybe I need to make extra Phoenixes. Maybe I need a lot of High Templar. I'll actually unbolden the High Templar here for a moment. Maybe damn it, would you get unbold, man? Thank you. Maybe use a Warp Prism harass. My main army avoids the Broodlords. Expand a lot while running away. Which one of these do I want to work on? Pick 3. Alright, I like these. I like Warp Prisms, I think are cool. So I'm going to give that one a shot. Main army is avoiding the Broodlords. Maybe I need Blink. I'll go ahead and do that one. I don't really care that much for Phoenixes. Phoenixes don't really tickle my fancy. And the last one that I want to do, do I want to be an expanding player? Do I move? I guess I could do both of those, but I'm just going to go ahead and pick 3. I'm going to try these 3 things out. I'm going to see how these 3 things feel. This one does not actually seem that much of a stretch to do. There is every reason, though, to just try these 3 things out. What you don't want to do is get over-eager and be like, well, I want to expand a lot. I want to do all these things. Because it's kind of hard to do. Just 3 things at a time. What happens if problems come up over here back at one of these other red questions that I have? Doesn't matter. I'm just going to work on these 3 things at a time. So I now have this list. I'm going to kill the Phoenixes. We play a few games. It turns out that these things work really well. And it turns out, though, that I seem to be broke a lot. So I would have this sort of like follow up where it's like, I seem... Ow, he's hitting the wrong color. I seem to be low on money. I seem to clearly need this extra expand thing. These other things seem to work, so hey, no problem. I can end up putting that in. Or one of these other things works. Once I feel like that's starting to work, I can remove it. I can pop this one in. I can say, hey, that works. Suddenly, this becomes an answered question. Suddenly, this becomes a nice big fat green. What do I end up doing? Well, hell, you know what? I focused on it. These things, like, work very well for me. Now I have an answered question. And now it's time to, oh, now this thing, that expand a ton, harass with Warp Prism, I now have a more specific answer. But now, a very natural thing for you to do is just to say, well, Sean keeps clicking the wrong color in his Google document. I'm going to make it red again. What happens if he transitions to Hydra Roach? That seems like a perfectly reasonable question. Perfectly reasonable. I could even try to ask myself what happens if he goes Mass Muta Ling in late game. And I can just keep these on the brain. There's a very important moment that you're starting to notice that we are getting some very good detail of all these things. The one thing that seems to have the biggest hole in it is this area. Relatively early third base while getting fast Templar. I seem to know how to expand. I seem to know some ideas of how to play out my Stargate. I seem to know how to do my warp pylon harass stuff. But all of a sudden, I don't have any good answers for this middle. So that would probably be the next thing that I actually want to work on. And I would do a 1 and a 2 and a 3 for this. But one thing that I think is really important to do is that if you somehow want to work on one of these questions, then put that as something you want to be aware of, and then don't focus on that much else. This is something that you can end up doing quite a bit, where you will end up saying something like, all right, when I early expand, I want to try to be working on my Stargate timing, because I'm not quite sure when to build my my assimilators. That's the first thing I'm really trying to work on. The second thing that I'm really trying to work on is controlling my Void Rays and Phoenixes. So all of a sudden, these two things kind of closely related. And then you want to say, and in the late game, I'm kind of aware that there are some late game things that I'm unsure of how to deal with. And then you now have 3 things that you are working on. You're expanding these things out 3 at a time. So one thing that I'm going to do now, just to kind of wrap things up, I'm just going to go through and ask myself 3 questions at every point in time. So 3 questions are, when do assimilators, what is the relationship between the gateway, core, and assimilators? I want to look at that. Gateway, core, and assimilators. I want to flesh this out. He gets 1 assimilator pretty early on. I don't care about specifics. He builds his cybernetics core, and then he gets a 2nd assimilator. Huh. This actually does not take that much effort to do. I'm still asking myself, when is assimilators built? When are assimilators built? When is gateway or core built? When is 3rd assimilator built? And then it looks like the build order I can change to gas, core, gas. And then when does he build his other one? Gas, core, gas. Wow, really late 2nd gas. Wow, really late. Damn. Actually quite late. Quite late. 3rd gas. I'm starting to get some more answers. How did this mid-game go? I don't want to flesh this out that much. But, okay, so here's 3 things that kind of happen at the same time. He ends up getting up to 4 gateways. He ends up getting a Twilight Council, and he kind of gets a 3rd up. Or he gets Templar Archives before he gets a 3rd. Huh. How do all my upgrade timings work? What is the relationship between my expo and my gateways? What upgrades? Yeah, I guess I can lump that into how am I upgrade timing, relationship with X1 gateways. What units am I building right now? Those are some really good questions to ask, and if I'm just focusing on just these three things, how do all my upgrade timing work, blah, 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 I'm slowly starting to flesh things out. So, even though these still might seem like big, broad questions, and they are relatively big, broad questions, still know that we have thorough answers up here, we have some thorough answers down here, and now we're sort of building out the middle. You will often end up in situations where your late game doesn't feel that good because something was going wrong early. Just stop working on the late game and come back and focus on the early game. Just go ahead and stop doing what you're working on and work on something else. Sometimes, this has happened to me before, where I'll say something like, damn it, I'm having a horrible time against Mutiling. I am going to think about these big ideas for Mutiling. And I sit down, and for 10 games in a row, no one's going Mutiling against me. So I'm like, all right, sweet, you know what? I am going to kind of put that on the back burner, and I'm going to focus on Roach Hydra. And then I'm getting all sorts of Roach Hydra stuff, all sorts of answers are getting done, all sorts of stuff's getting fleshed out. And then all of a sudden, I come back in the next game, and someone goes Mutiling, and I go, oh, okay, cool. I'm going to drop thinking about everything else because there's these three things that I wanted to work on. We're going to start taking some questions real fast now. But you can see that, oh, cool, we now have kind of an early expand. I'm going to rearrange this. Yeah, Gateway 1 cannon, gas, core gas, quiet late third gas, non-stop Zell production, doing some poking, Stargate, starting to flesh some things out. Yeah, there's all sorts of things that we don't quite have the timing for yet. Like, when does our Warp Prism get built? When do we actually take out the rocks at our third? When do we end up taking our fourth and fifth? And these are all valid questions, but they're self-answerable questions. The important thing is to sort of scope it out. And I love doing this kind of color coding because you're seeing that we have a lot of things that we're doing with buildings, including these units as things to do, can sort of help step them out. And these big red things will always stick out in my notes. Generally what I do is I make a big red box around it. And I'm just like, that's so rough. Now, I'm going to take questions, but I want you to ask questions about this style of like doing things three at a time, because it's very easy to just be like, oh, that was really cool. So I'm having this problem with mech. Let me open up Markio's question grabber. And by the way, I'm going to be on State of the Game in 10 minutes, or 5 minutes, so I got to make sure I do that properly. All right, cool. Oh, perfect question from Atlas247. Day 9, how long does it take to get a fully fleshed out build? I feel kind of like, depends on what sort of person you are. I would go for like 100 to 200 games. You can get probably 90% of the way there after about 30 to 50 games for a build in a matchup. Not dealing with too much unorthodoxy. Probably closer to 30 to 50 games. Seems reasonable. What you'll end up what happens quite a bit is you'll have things A, B, and C you're working on, and then right off the bat, C feels great. And you're like, all right, cool. Next game, I'm going to work on A, B, and C. C still feels great. Boom. All right, now I'm going to work on X. So now we're working on A, B, and X. And likewise, B ends up being pretty rapidly pulled off. But like A is always an issue that sticks with you. It's important to have, again, three things that that you're working on that are kind of related to each other. Always helps, but in general, three things. Because if you just say, I'm going to work on just this one thing, a lot of times you end up selling yourself short of the fun of having, a couple of ideas that you have in your head. But you don't want to have too many ideas. Be really comfortable saying, shit, I don't have a plan against a Mutiling player. I have no clue whatsoever. Wow, damn. I'm just going to lose. And then you lose, and then you just move on and say, yeah, it's not what I'm working on. Don't care. You can work on things one at a time. It feels a little slow. I like having sort of like a whole jumble of questions. The most important thing I think of all is being able to come up with these sorts of things. With these unanswered questions. Like all these things that we have right here are like totally unanswered. How do all my upgrade timings work? And then I'm just going to propose like first +2 attack, then storm, then blink. Things like that. And just make sure you have these little red questions stuck out in your mind. And that's going to be the real thing, the real key. Take a question, have an answer, have it as good or bad. Takes quite a while. Let's see here. Okay, so Sarek X says, Dear Day 9, won't this just leave you with a massive poster of information? Or is it more to exercise your memory into proper execution? It's really that second thing. At the end, you'll have a really fully fleshed out plan, but you won't think of it as a huge long list. It will have just already happened. You'll already just be executing it automatically. You'll have the muscle memory. It'll just be straightforward. It won't actually be a big task. You won't actually have to sit at night and memorize. Instead, what'll happen is when you come back, all this happens automatically. And every time you step into game, your hands are just doing this without any thought. And all you really are aware of are these big red questions. How do my upgrade timings work? How do this stuff works? I mean, for instance, like there were long periods of time where I just said, you know what? I really need to work on my probe production. I really need a chrono boost here and build pylons there and all that stuff. And I got to the point where I was like, all right, cool. My pylon production is solid. And my probe production is solid. And now, every time I'm playing, that never actually ends up affecting my build orders. Or even more in a strategic sense, I'm really comfortable against Mutaling and Protoss vs. Zerg. Just really comfortable getting the right composition up. And even though I used to have all these sorts of red questions sticking out in my mind, once I got it down, I'm like, cool, sweet, got it. And then when I go try a new build out in Protoss vs. Zerg, I'm like, oh, well, he seems to be going Mutaling right now. I kind of have a good sense of how to get back to that. And I end up just sort of working my way back. I don't need to say, oh, he's going Mutaling again. Allow me to consult my notes. How did I do that again? Oh, that's right. However, with this sort of slow fleshing out of things, you don't end up with any lost direction. You really know what threads are left unresolved. Because it is a really stupid feeling to be like, damn, I don't really know how to deal with Mutaling. And then you play and play and play, and no one's going Mutaling, and you kind of forget that that was such a struggle. And then one player goes Mutaling, but he did it poorly, and then you're like, oh, cool, I guess I get it now. And then suddenly, a player does it well, and you lose, and you're like, God, how do I end up stopping this? You kind of forgot, or you kind of forget about it. I can take one more question, then I have to go to state of the game. Wah! So iLocomo says, Day 9, usually people try to stick with builds that help in more than one situation. How do we decide what threats can be dropped to focus on other paths the opponent might take? This is sort of this conditional thing where, like, here's something that happens quite a bit, where you'll have a build and it will work versus a 3-basing Zerg, right? I'm actually going to come to my notepad and just kind of redraw out the way that this might look. So have a build works versus 3-base Zerg. So the way that this would originally start out is versus Zerg, do build X, right? It starts out really abstract, really simple, and you have some deviations where you'll say if he goes Roach Hydra, respond with A. If he goes Mutaling, respond with B. And everything's feeling kind of good. You even label these as these green things where this is looking good. And then suddenly a player ends up going 2-base versus you and gets really fast Mutalisks. And you realize, oh, I need to revise this. Versus Zerg, who goes 3-base versus me. This works. versus Zerg, who goes 2 base versus me. If he goes Mutaling, I have no clue. And now, this is the sort of separation that ends up happening. So to answer that question about, you know, when do you know when to make these sorts of deviations or not, the answer is to be able to come back and to be able to start off with something that looked like this, where you were doing well, and to try to turn it into a series of conditions. You say to yourself, well, why the hell are these green? Why the hell do I seem good against Roach Hydra and Mutaling? Oh, in these games, the difference was 3 base versus 2 base. And the important thing, these caps lock things, the 3 base and the 2 base, this is the difference. So what are you looking for when you're scouting? You're looking for a 3 base player or a 2 base player. How do you end up, what does that translate to? Well, you might say then, you might do something like Liquid Hero, where you get 2 Zealots out really quickly, and then what do you do with them? Well, you rush all the way up to his 3rd base. Because if we actually go to the hero cam, he meanders around, he actually checks this 3rd, and then he comes on over to here. And then he just hangs out there. So you can kind of see how he ended up saying, well, is 3 base versus 2 base the issue at hand? Well, hell, in that case, what I'm going to do is I am going to open up with Zealots to poke at his bases to see if he's going 3 base or 2 base. And then this becomes an action in your gameplay. Let's make it blue. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I'd like to, again, give an extra special thanks to Team Liquid, who gave me access to this exclusive Liquid Hero replay. And we're going to be looking at awesome hero plays all week, his sort of craziness and his goodness. Again, the Fun Day Monday for next week is to play a 4v4 in champion mode. One of you is the champion, and the other 3 must publicly declare who the champion is and give praises to him. The champion may never have more than 20 food in workers. The other players may never have more than 20 food in units. In other words, all the other players are constantly money dumping to the champion, and it is up to him to win the game. Submit those to Monday at day9.tv. I'm going to State of the Game. Woohoo!